Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
And I'm Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and pretty tolerant friend.
Pretty tolerant, not overly
Yeah.
tolerant.
Yeah.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non-human technology,
Or at least we will, once they declassified Dylan Borland's Arrow report.
it raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely, but even if it's new science and not aliens,
Woo! It's a very exciting time.
it is.
Oh,
Hey, buddy.
man.
It's nice to talk to you
Hey.
again. It's been a while.
Yeah. Greetings from war-torn Portland.
Yes.
The streets are overrun by people in inflatable frog costumes.
Yeah, it's been some interesting news about that. You'll have to tell me all about it after the show, because I want to know what's actually happening.
Sure, but I am more excited to talk to you about UAP witness, whistleblower, Dylan Borland. Now,
Yeah, that checks
we
out.
talked about him in the last episode when we talked about the congressional hearing. He was one of the witnesses there.
Can you remind me who he is again? It has been a month.
So he was the guy. He had a sighting of a big weird triangle on a military base that had like golden lava lamp stuff flowing over it. And then he was the one who talked about how he had suffered a lot of reprisals that had basically ruined his life because he was exposed to this information.
Got it.
What was really interesting about him is he told his firsthand story, and then he strongly implied that in the course of his work, he had been exposed to information about crash retrievals, legacy programs, stuff like that. But he wouldn't say anything about that. He would just say, I can tell you that in a skiff. So I was pretty excited when George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell dropped a 2-part interview with Dylan Borland in the weeks after the hearing. The interview is great. There's a couple funny things about it. First of all, it's maybe they've done this before, but I'm not a regular listener to their podcast. I'm ashamed to admit, but they redacted a bunch of stuff in it. So they would ask him, they're like, where were you working? He's like, I was working at the Air Force under redacted. And, we did a program that was under the auspices of the CIA and redacted, they would just redact things. So what happened is they recorded this podcast, this interview, a few weeks before the congressional hearing. And what they said is he had 6 days to get his classified statement in line for Congress. So they were a little unclear on what they were able to talk about, but they were trying to be very clear, we're not redacting much stuff about UFOs. It's mostly which agency he was working under and the name of his boss and stuff that is classified that we're not sure if we're legally allowed to mention. We don't want to get him in trouble.
Yeah. Okay.
So first of all, there's just the weirdness of watching an interview and having regular bits be redacted. Second of all, we get quite a bit more information about the reprisals that he suffered. Okay. And we get a bit more information about when and how he was exposed to the legacy stuff. But here's the really funny thing. One of the most exciting parts of the interview was initially redacted. So I watched both of these episodes on YouTube back to back. They were good. And then the next day, Jeremy Corbell's like, hey, here's one of those redacted bits. And it's this wild story about how there are photos of them digging up Tic-Tacs in archaeological dig sites. So we're going to get to that. But
okay.
I understand why this might have been redacted. I don't understand how you got permission to publish it, but I'm very excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's give a brief summary here at the top. At one point, Corbell asks Dylan Borland, he says, so you were exposed specifically to proof about UAP reverse engineering in an official capacity, meaning while you're at work. What is it that you saw and found out and can tell us about? And Borland looks a little uncomfortable, and he kind of mentions, he's like, I'm not sure how much of this will make it to air, but
Yeah.
what I will say is this. I have direct firsthand knowledge and exposure to crash recoveries, reverse engineering, integration of technology into redacted, as well as the most important piece of technology on the planet, which is not the craft themselves. And Corbell goes, it would be the power source. And Borland goes, you can make that assessment yourself.
So he didn't actually say, yes, it was a power source, right?
I mean, he's not allowed to. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a wink and a nod. You can make that assessment yourself. It's a no comment. You can make that assessment yourself. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He doesn't confirm it, but that's what Jeremy Corbell is like. It's the power source.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
interesting.
So very interesting. A little later, Corbell says, so you have direct knowledge from your official work capacity of UAP being actual craft of unknown or non-human origin. And Borland says, 100%. Not only do I have it, I testified to it. I provided materials proving it, including 3 drawings. One of the triangle was unclassified, and they show it. And the triangle looks exactly the way you would expect from the way he described it. A big 100-foot equilateral triangle with, maybe like 50-foot walls and lights on the bottom. Like, not super detailed. And he kind of sketches the lava lamp stuff flowing over it. He says, the other 2 were immediately thrown into a special access program, and the 2 that were thrown into a SAP prove that we are not alone.
That's super interesting. When you said drawings at first, I imagined him holding up like a piece of paper with like a crayon drawing of a triangle. It's like, okay, well, I see why that wasn't classified, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, like one of them is like a high-tech blueprint, and one of those is like doodle.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, they show him recreating the triangle drawing, and they make a big deal of it. The other 2, obviously, they do not show. I don't know if he drew them for Knapp and Corbell, but if he did, they don't show them. But he makes an analogy to the kinds of things that might have been in that drawing later. So we'll get to that when we talk about his whistleblower testimony.
Yeah, cool.
So I want to kind of briefly recap the story about the triangle for anybody that didn't listen to the previous episode. The short version is he saw an unusual triangle-shaped craft. He talked about it in front of Congress, but there were a couple of more details that came up when he told the story to Knapp and Corbell. So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but let's kind of briefly go through this.
Yeah.
So Borland says, summer of 2012, I leave the ops floor at the place he's working, which is Langley Air Force Base. 1:30 in the morning, I go into the gazebo by my barracks, and I'm smoking a cigarette. I'm on the phone with my buddy, and I see a white light pop up from the NASA hangar. And in my mind, I think, oh, weather balloon test. No big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it happens twice a day from most NOAA weather stations, but NASA doesn't launch that often, but it's still like once a month. So, yeah, I could see that.
But I assume if you're the kind of guy who works nights and swing shift on a military base with a NASA hangar nearby, like, you're used to seeing some things being launched from there. So
yeah, because he
doesn't
it's
really bat an eye.
Yeah, I think it's noon and midnight at most stations. So yeah.
Yeah. So he says he finishes smoking his cigarette, and then he gave quite a bit of detail about what life is like for working these like middle of the night, like satellite analysis jobs, which is there's a lot of time where you're basically on call, but you don't have work to do. So you're not allowed to go to sleep, but it's the middle of the night. So he's like, I would do things like I would walk the track, like you're out in the street, you're not going to get hit by a car, and I'm just listening to podcasts or whatever. So he finishes smoking his cigarette. He starts walking towards the track. He says, I start walking up to where this light is hovering above the NASA hangar, and the white light flies across the flight line to me. All of a sudden, while it is flying to me, a 100 to 150 foot equilateral triangle appears. Now, I can't tell you if it was an act of camouflage. I can't tell you if it manifested around it. The only thing I can tell you is that light came and a triangle appeared around it.
Around it or like behind it? I don't know. That's weird. A weird
So
statement.
there's a light in the center of the triangle. So what I'm imagining is this light comes forward and now suddenly you can see there's a triangle. So he is
Oh,
very
okay.
hesitant to say it teleported, it transformed, it uncloaked. Like all he says is, I saw a light and then it was a triangle.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But I think it's interesting that he is not saying, as it got closer, I could see it was a triangle. I think he would have said
Yeah,
that if it was like the
right,
details resolved as it got closer. There
right.
was something about it gets close to him and then suddenly it's a triangle with no like
Yeah,
obvious transition. Yeah.
that makes sense. The way it was phrased, it sounded like the triangle like zoomed in and gobbled the light up. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
that's weird. But okay.
So he mentioned he's on the phone to his buddy. He says, my cell phone gets incredibly hot and completely freezes and shuts down. I'm under it, and the first thought in my mind is literally, okay, so this is real too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny to think about like, when you're doing a wireless charger and you like touch your phone and it's like, oh God, it's so hot. Like
Yeah.
I'm imagining
Yeah.
it's like some alien chi charger or something, but our phones
Totally.
weren't up to it at that time.
Yeah, it's top of the line spaceflight technology, but it's
Hmm.
like off-brand Temu Wi-Fi charging.
Exactly.
They got to cut corners somewhere. Even
Yeah,
aliens
yeah,
don't have unlimited
totally.
budget.
Yeah.
So Borland says, I'm under it for 3 to 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden the center light flashes, and that thing shoots off to commercial airjet level. It gets to that flight level in seconds, like 3 seconds easy. And after a few minutes, it goes due east, out over the bay, out into the Atlantic Ocean. I made the point that it did not go to Norfolk, where the naval station is. It didn't go north towards the marine station. It went out over the ocean.
Yeah, interesting. So at 35,000 feet, like I don't think you can I don't think you can see a lot, even like a really big airplane, let alone 150 foot across. But
I mean,
like,
I see
I get the
airplanes
point.
flying overhead all the time.
Yeah,
Like,
but they're like, they're in approach or landing, or like takeoff.
that may
Um,
be true. I don't know what level they're at. But again,
yeah,
this is a guy who works on an Air Force base.
yeah,
He
I get
makes a
it.
point that he sees jets flying at this level all the time. He has a good
Yeah,
understanding of what it is. Now,
yeah,
he'll
it's
talk
real
about
high.
what it is in a second, but the point is it goes all the way up and stops at what he's estimating is 30,000 feet or so.
Hmm.
Um, I was kind of expecting you to make this point, so I'm doing
Yeah.
math right now, which is not my
Oh
strong
no.
point. But
Yeah.
30,000 feet in 3 seconds, that's 10,000 feet a second, which is what, like 600 miles an hour? Like, how fast are
Uh,
rockets? Like, that seems very fast to me.
uh, I mean, it depends on where you are in the orbit, but uh, miles per hour is also not my forte for rocketry. But I think it's something like 23,000 miles an hour. Um,
Yeah, so they
so,
go a lot faster in orbit, but I'm talking about
uh,
like launch,
oh, launch time? Yeah, I don't know.
right?
It varies, but it's
So
600
when
miles an
you're
hour probably
launching, you're
isn't too bad.
dealing with atmosphere. You're going very
Yeah,
fast. And also, when we launch rockets, they're aerodynamic. They're pointed.
yeah,
We're talking
yeah,
about
right.
the flat side of an equilateral
Exactly.
triangle going straight up with no noise, no sonic boom,
Yeah,
no exhaust, no vapor trail, just boop, boop. Like,
yeah.
so very, very unusual.
Hmm. Yeah.
Borland says, at that moment, I felt static electricity all over my body, and I immediately smell a rainstorm, lightning storm, like a strong lightning thunderstorm. That smell that you smell after it.
See, so this is not like familiar to me. like the ozone smell, or
Mhm.
like in Oregon we get the like fresh rain smell from like mushrooms sporing, but um I don't know.
I he doesn't specify.
Okay. Yeah, I
I'm
suppose I
assuming
shouldn't
he
nit.
means ozone, given his mention of static electricity
Yeah.
and his phone. Like, there's clearly electrical stuff happening
Yeah,
here.
good point.
But I'm kind of charmed by the idea that he's like, this thing took off and it smelled like fresh meadow. Like it was so so relaxing. Took off and it smelled like lavender.
It turns out it's a commercial for that soap brand
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
So remember, his phone got real
Yeah.
hot and shut down. He said, so at this point, my phone, I'm able to reset it and I want to take a picture of it. And the only light I can see anymore is the center light. And if I didn't witness it take off, it would have looked like a star. So that gets
Sure.
back to what you were saying about the elevation.
Yeah.
He said, I kick myself to this day because I'm looking at my phone and thinking, should I keep this? No one's ever going to believe it. You can't see anything, but the date and time are there. And I'm an idiot. I erased it.
I mean, yeah, without a lot more data, like it's just going to be dismissed by the community. But it could be fun.
It
I don't
wouldn't
know.
hurt to
Yeah,
have it, you know? And
yeah.
one of the things that he talks about a lot, especially as he gets into the reprisals, is the frustration of um not having hard evidence of
Mm,
things. So you
yeah.
end up in a he said, she said situation where like the VA is claiming that something didn't happen. And if he didn't have a police record or something like that
Mm,
independent, they would be able to just paint him as a lunatic. Um,
right.
so anyway, I I get the instinct both of deleting it and also of kicking yourself later for deleting it.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would have deleted it by accident. Like, ugh, I just got an out of focus picture of the sky. Like, what was the point?
100%. So George Knapp asks him, did it seem to be reacting to you because you had seen it? Which I think is a really good question.
Mm,
And Borland says, that's one of those questions that I would love to know because it's one of the things that keeps me up at night. Why did it fly across the base to me?
to get to the other side.
God damn it. You're fired, Chuck.
Yep.
Knapp continues. He says, so what then? Is there a process you would follow for something like that? Like tell your commanding officer or file a written report or what? And Borland kind of laughs. He's like, there's no process at all.
Oh.
I told a couple of my friends, and there was a couple sergeants who heard me talking one night, and one of them actually told me, Dylan, you never talk about this.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, funny guy. He's like, no, trust me, don't talk about it. And I
Mm,
thought it was a joke, but apparently he's right though. Hindsight's 2020.
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is where things start to go very poorly for him.
Indeed. Yeah,
Okay.
our boy goes through some shit from this
Mm,
point out. Now, you will notice a recurring theme of our boy also has trouble keeping his mouth shut. He's not wrong that he
yeah.
should be able to talk about it, but he is confronted over and over again with the evidence that talking
Mm,
about this is a bad idea, and he
mm.
just can't stop himself.
Yeah, I get that.
Um, so Borland says, so I was required to get my wisdom teeth removed to deploy to Afghanistan.
Wait, what? What's that?
Yeah, I kind of figured that'd be your question. He explained it on the show, and the short answer is um, when they're sending troops overseas, one of the single most common reasons they get sent back home is dental issues. So if there's
Sure.
any like preventative things they
Okay.
can do, they do them up front, and
Makes
yanking your
sense.
wisdom teeth is one of them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know how you always hear horror stories about someone's
Yeah.
wisdom teeth extraction going terribly wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So Borland says, they cut the nerve in my face, so I can't feel the right half of my face.
Oh my God.
The left half of my face is numb. At the same time, I slipped a disc in my back,
Oh
L5,
my God.
S1. Long story short, I went up to the medical board and they denied I ever had the surgery and they took me out of the Air Force. I was a 10% disabled veteran, and I had to fight the VA for over 10 years for them to even acknowledge I had the wisdom teeth removed, which is getting into things that are odd, to say the least, of what has happened to me since I saw that triangle and what has happened to me since I came into the information that I came into.
That that sucks. Like, I don't understand what the Air Force would have to, well, aside from not paying for his VA bills. I just don't see why they would want to deny that he was in the Air Force. Like,
Yeah. Now, I want to be real careful here because one of the things they talk about in the podcast, and of course, I'm sharing the juiciest
yeah,
morsels of
course.
almost 3-hour interview with you, but they're pretty clear that one of the incredibly frustrating things about this is a lot of the reprisals that he suffered are deniable. They're any individual thing might be nothing. It is not uncommon to speak to vets who are frustrated at the level of care they receive from the VA. But
Yeah.
it's also undeniably a pattern that we hear from whistleblowers and people that the military would like to shut up, that some of the reprisals come in the form of things that you are supposed to be entitled to are suddenly removed from you, including medical care or things like we get into it a lot later. But
okay,
the thing I want to be clear to anybody who's kind of rolling their eyes at any individual story, he talks about many, many things that happened to him. And I want you to hear the cumulative effect of all of these. Any individual one of them might be nothing, might just be normal administrative bullshit. But cumulatively, they do paint a pretty compelling picture that he is being targeted. So yeah, he's in the Air Force. He finishes his deployment at Langley. He thinks he's going to Afghanistan. His surgery goes wrong, and he gets a medical discharge from the Air Force. He says, after leaving the Air Force in 2013, I joined a multi-agency special access program under BAE. That's British Aerospace Engineering Systems. He says BAE is the UK's version of Lockheed or Northrop Grumman, and they have an American subsidiary that's allowed to operate in America because most of the special access programs are, in addition to like top secret, SCI, all the other things we've talked about, there's a common acronym called No Foreign, which means literally no foreign access to this. Even our allies should not be exposed. So BAE has an American subsidiary that does get to work on this. He's working for them.
Okay.
And in particular, it's worth noting, he's actually working for multiple intelligence agencies, 3-letter agencies, but his paychecks are coming from BAE. It's all under the umbrella of this special access program that's operating under BAE, but it's all intelligence community stuff.
Okay. So it sounds like when they booted him from the Air Force, they didn't like burn him entirely because he was still able to get a job in military, right?
Not yet. We'll get to that.
Cool.
So this is pretty common. And once you leave active service, you still have clearances and you'll go get jobs in private programs, things like that. So this part is not unusual that you would leave the service and then join a program and continue doing IC work, but under a private agency.
Sure.
And he talks a lot about the work he does there. The short version is, you know about the drone program, right? So they'll be flying drones over combat areas or looking for high profile targets, things like that. And there's both the active strike part of it. Hey, we spotted this target, launch a missile at it. But also there's a lot of just surveillance.
Sure.
Borland was working on the imagery analysis part of that. So he's doing the kind of quote unquote spy work of tracking targets, identifying targets, coming up with information. And he said his job would be to send an analysis up the chain of command for them to decide whether or not to make a strike. So, you know, after we've analyzed this, we're confident that this person is here, yada, yada, yada. So
Yeah.
that's the
Got
work he's doing. He says, early on, I liked the work. And then to clarify, he was doing that work for the Air Force. He continued to do that type of work for BAE.
Okay.
One of the things he talked about is this was very frustrating work because over time it stopped being clear-cut things like combat support. This group of troops in Afghanistan is under fire. That's a clear-cut situation if you're part of the American military.
Yeah.
To more like, imagine, a terrorist leader living in a civilian area.
Right.
Tricky
Like
decisions, stressful stuff.
Yeah.
But he says, early on, I liked the work. Then things took a dramatic, insane turn. I found out I was working illegally the entire time I was there. About 7 months into working there, I found out that my clearance was revoked administratively, and I was not in any system, and no one could look me up. So I was basically stuck working there indefinitely, or I had to leave the intelligence community completely.
Interesting.
And Corbell responds, he says, that sounds like administrative terrorism, where it sounds like some sort of purgatory, where you're put in a position where you're technically illegally working, which means you can't go out and get other employment. You can't leave that job. It's like when we hear about, people going to work in shitty overseas factories and they take your passport from you. Like,
right, yeah.
You don't have to keep doing this job, but they've restricted the options of what you can do once you leave.
Yeah, is it so? Like, the thing I don't understand is, so like, in theory, he doesn't have clearances anymore. But if he got a job at another place, couldn't he try and get clearances again, or is it just, I don't know, maybe that's too hard.
We'll cover this a little bit later, but I'm just gonna put up my hands here and admit I don't understand the vagaries of the clearance system. The way he describes it is there are a couple of systems, I think it was like JPass or something like that, that hold your clearances. So he's issued clearances as a result of being in the Air Force. When he starts working for BAE, these clearances are supposed to be put in that system, and they kind of travel with him. And what happened is, he says they were administratively revoked, but the implication seems to be more like BAE has hidden them and will not release them. And we'll talk more about it later when he tries to leave. But he's kind of stuck. So Borland says they were notified 6-7 months into it. And then from then, they outright did not care. They terrorized me. They were notified by multiple companies that they were not housing my clearances correctly. Multiple companies tried to pick me up, said they would give me a pay raise, a better job. I couldn't take any of it. They would file complaints, and I get the runaround between BAE and the two agencies that I work for. It is my opinion, and other people who are also whistleblowers that have worked in these programs, that this is a standard operating procedure to keep this quiet.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that sucks.
That does suck. And Knapp kind of clarifies it. He says, so all of your job training has been in classified programs, and they now tell you you don't have a clearance. You can't go work anywhere else. I mean, you could quit and go work at McDonald's or something, but if it would be as if my ability to be a programmer was tied to a certificate that my boss was holding and wouldn't let go of. I can leave, but I can't go be a programmer. So he said they're keeping it in a purgatory, which is a technique we've heard over and over of how to keep people somewhere and try to squeeze them out through pressure. So that's the other thing, is it's implying that they're trying to force them to quit and leave the intelligence community altogether.
Yeah.
And Knapp clarifies, he says, I just want to make this clear. It's not like he ever had a mark on his record where they're like, you no longer have a clearance. It is officially being pulled. It's he's in good standing. It's just a type of purgatory these people create.
That's so interesting. I mean, it sucks, but I think I get what he's saying. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna make what seems like kind of a hard left turn here.
Okay.
I mentioned
Let's get weird.
I mentioned there were redactions.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that then they released one of those redactions. I'm including it here, even though it seems like an odd time, because chronologically, this is when it happens. While
Okay.
he's working at BAE, he meets a lot of other people who, like him, are suffering administrative terrorism, who were members of the legacy program. And he learns some interesting things, and we get a little more information about how he came into contact with these people.
Okay.
So, what's frustrating is the clip that they finally unredacted starts in the middle of a sentence. So it opens with Borland in the middle of saying something, and I don't know what the first part of this is. But Borland says, quote, "To do tracking of what was described at that point as propane tanks. They had photographic evidence of archaeological digs of some of these, and they have photographic evidence of ones that were complete. These are very old. They were informed they were very old. They did not disclose where they came from," which goes back to Arrow and the word games that are played with Arrow in this subject. "But they were told, we're trying to track these things. We've contacted them. We have this technology. We're working on bringing them down."
That's weird. Have we heard, like, I remember the ancient aliens thing, but I don't know if that was specifically about Tic-Tacs. Have we heard stuff like this before?
So here's the funny thing. I would have said no, but it turns out we have two references to archaeological UFOs. So first of all, there's just a lot to unpack here, right? Like, basically Borland is hearing from other people that were members of the legacy program that they saw photographic evidence of archaeological digs and Tic-Tacs. They're told, we're trying to track these things. Okay, that makes sense. Sure. I believe that. We've contacted them. Okay, well, now we're in Skywatcher territory. Are we talking about psionic assets? Are we talking about the dog whistle? Are we talking about, like, full diplomatic relations? Like, I want to know a lot more about those three words. Right. We have this technology. Which technology? Do you mean we have reverse engineered Tic-Tacs? We're working on bringing them down.
Yeah.
Okay, Jesus Christ. So much to unpack. But anyway, getting back to the idea of, have we heard about archaeological records of UFOs before? First quote, Bob Lazar, who, remember, his whole claim is while working at an area outside of Area 51, he saw a hangar with either 9 or 12 different models of UFOs parked inside being researched. When he was asked where the craft he saw came from, Lazar said at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig, so it's old. At least one of them is old. Not just old, it's ancient. Now, take Bob Lazar with a grain of salt. Sure. He's a controversial figure, but the other person we've heard talk about this is Lou Elizondo, who gave an analogy at one point to unexpected information. And I've gone back to a couple of the interviews because he makes this point a handful of times. And usually what he's trying to say is, when we're looking at things, we factor in the timeline. And usually he's trying to make the point that, like, maybe we could make the things we're looking at today, but could we make them in the 40s? Could we make them in the past? And the analogy he gave was, a 747 isn't uncommon to see at an international airport, but imagine being the first guy to break into King Tut's tomb, and of all the things you find in there, you find an intact 747 sitting in the tomb.
Yeah, okay. That'd be a little wild. Like, how did
I took this
learn?
as a pure hypothetical when he said it, because he was clearly trying to make the point that, like, maybe these things have been around for a while. But now I'm wondering if he knows the same thing that Borland's guys know, and that, like, literally we've dug up Tic-Tacs.
Maybe that was
less of a metaphor than an overt acknowledgement.
Right, yeah, maybe that was a wry hint.
Yeah,
interesting.
Right. So as you can imagine, they had a lot of questions about this. Now, what's interesting is most of these questions were in the unredacted part of the interviews that were already released. It was, as I went back through my notes, I'm like, oh, he's referring to this redacted bit. I just didn't catch it at the time.
Yeah.
So Corbell, at one point in the unredacted part of the interview, says, the information you had about these flying Tic-Tacs that people are taking down, which I don't know why that registered to me. He hadn't said anything about Tic-Tacs being taken down. He said, did you get that information through your work at BAE and that agency? Great question. Borland says, there were people who ended up working there with me who were brought into the legacy program, whose lives were also destroyed. And they believed I was read into the program. And they believed that because I was having these clearances issues and the VA issues and everything else, the financial. And what they did to me, they were experiencing too. So they thought it was safe to talk to me about their own experiences in the legacy program.
I mean, yeah, makes sense. And they wouldn't have any way of like checking his clearances either. Yeah.
It's funny because Knapp kind of overtly calls him on it. He's like, so... not that he lied to them, but like they kind of believed that he knew more than he really did and started telling him things. He's like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how that, I don't know how that discussion happens. Like, hey, are you read into this program that I'm not allowed to acknowledge? Like,
well, it's funny you say that. So they talk about this a little bit. Knapp says, how do you end up seeing information that says we've got prehistoric archaeological digs that are coming up with propane Tic-Tacs, and at the same time we're seeing them flying around and we need to take them down? And Borland says that was part of their briefing, the briefing to the people in the legacy program that I know. And Corbell interrupts. He says, did you physically see photos or documents? And Borland says, no, but they were relaying this to me because they were genuinely concerned for their lives, because their careers were taken, their houses were broken into, their computers were taken, their mailboxes gone through. The agreement was that if they died, that I'd just run with it and blow the whole thing up.
oh, so he's their dead man switch.
Yeah. So that does change a little bit. Like, I know sometimes people kind of slam David Grush for like third-hand information. This is all just stories he heard. But I do think there's some context that if a buddy tells me about a UFO he saw while we're drinking beers and shooting the shit, and he's kind of like bragging and telling a cool story, it's fair to wonder if he's telling the truth. If my buddy comes to me and says, I'm worried they're going to assassinate me, you're in on this program too, here's what I know, if I die, leak this to the media, that hits a little different.
That feels different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No reason to exaggerate that.
Right. So Corbell says, so people directly involved with the legacy program are afraid for their lives, and they're telling you so that you can take that information if something bad happens to them. And Borland says, it was definitely that, but it was also, this is such an isolating, lonely experience, especially for young people, to be exposed to the reality of this. If all of a sudden this pops up on your radar and you're seeing physical proof of it, you probably have to take a step back and go, well, so you have that aspect. But then the same people that have that aspect of it, they also have the aspect of their government trying to destroy them.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine having to like grapple with the reality of things and while simultaneously being targeted.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because this is already a life-changing experience. And one of the things we regularly hear from firsthand witnesses is you can't stop thinking about it, right? Like there's a reason we hear these stories of these people like trawling message boards and classified files, like just desperately looking for any confirmation of the weird thing that happened to them. George Knapp ends with, so these people that gave you this information, he said, do you know what happened to them? And Borland said, the ones that I know still continue in the government. they continue in their classified operations programs. And it really sucks because I only came forward as a whistleblower because I sincerely believed they were going to die.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I don't know is like, why would you continue at that point, especially if they're young? Um, it's not
Yep.
like they could get a new start, a new career or whatever, but I don't know.
So I don't want to get too into this because we're going to talk
Yeah.
about reprisals a lot later. But one of the things Borland talks about is, um, they yank his clearances and he's unemployed for what I've now reconstructed is 6 months to a year.
Mm.
I can tell you I was laid off a few years back and I was unemployed for only 6 months. And we nearly were destroyed by the experience. Yeah. I cashed out my 401k. I spent all of it. We stopped paying credit card bills. We almost got to the point where we had to stop paying rent. We were weeks away from being evicted because we couldn't pay the rent when I was able to find a new job. And when I did, I had to start all over, like... Here I am in my 40s, no retirement funds, no savings, family to care for, single income.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I agree with you in the sense that why would you stay in the toxic situation if you're young enough that maybe you could start over? But it's also not as simple as, well, this IC thing didn't work out. I guess I'll just quit and go back to school. Like anything that's going to start you over is going to require financial bootstrapping. And
no, that makes sense.
Not everyone has that.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I've been talking a lot lately about moving internationally, and I'm just realizing how hard that is. And I guess it's probably the same thing here. It is incredibly hard. Yeah.
All right. So our little detour into the redacted information aside, what we're dealing with is Dylan Borland is working for a multi-program special access program under the auspices of BAE, but really working for a couple of three-letter agencies in the intelligence community. And he's dealing with, among other things, problems with his clearances. So Borland says, for 3.5 years, I worked for BAE without the ability to take another job. And the nature of the work we did, we would get a new boss every 6 months. People were in and out of there because that job is hell. 3.5 years into it, we get a new contractor boss, and he comes in and he does the typical, Dylan's lying, his clearance is fine, he doesn't have his master's degree, he's full of crap, and I'm like, I'm done with this, my man.
No. The new boss thing every 6 months is killer.
Oh my God, it's the worst. I've definitely been in that. I worked at one gig. I was only there for a year and I had 5 bosses in that time.
I used to have an info packet for our team about like, okay, this is who everyone is. This is the things we do. It's like, I hate that I've built a whole training around this.
Right. Now, I kind of glossed over a bit here that he talks quite a bit more about in the interview, but this is one of the things he's dealing with is he's talking openly to his coworkers about his experience with Triangle and his clearances being revoked. He has a master's degree, but they've lost it. All these issues with the VA, and his bosses are overtly playing his coworkers off of him, telling new employees don't talk to Dylan, making everybody believe that Dylan is lying while he's actively struggling with these things. So after 3.5 years, Borland says, so I went to my government employee. That's a weird phrase, but remember, he's technically working for a private company. So he's going to someone in the CIA or FBI or whatever, right?
Okay.
And I told him, I want to know who your boss is because I'm going to his office right now, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm telling him I want my stuff fixed. And he tried to tell me, don't do it. It's going to look bad. And I was like, I've been here for 3.5 years. I cannot do this anymore. This work is killing me. This is insane. This is the worst place on the planet Earth.
Yeah. I mean, so the clearance issues sound super frustrating, but like, what about it was the worst thing, or the worst? Yeah.
Right. So I kind of alluded to this earlier. Remember that a lot of what they're dealing with is drone program stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this very early in the interview, how demoralizing it is to eventually realize that um, the targets that he is being asked to analyze are no longer clear moral situations. And he's starting to feel increasingly depressed about it. He
Okay.
mentions that the drone program has the highest suicide rate in the military,
Wow.
because it's just so freaking depressing to deal
Yeah.
with. And in particular, he says that when he was in the Air Force, they were usually military engagements or more clear-cut things. And once he started working for BAE, he doesn't talk about the details of it, but the implication is he's doing things that are much more sketchy. And he's
Okay.
starting to worry, maybe I'm not working for great people, you
Are
know?
we the baddies? Yeah.
Yeah, literally. Only
Yeah.
in this case, yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
So he says, I'm going to go to your boss. The guy's like, bad idea,
Oh,
bro.
yeah.
Um, Borland says, so I go to his boss and I say, here's my name, here's my social. Look me up in the system that houses our clearances, because I guarantee you I'm not in there. And verbatim, he says to me, there's no way you wouldn't be allowed in the building. And I was like, you want to bet? He looks me up and he says, oh, wow, you haven't had a clearance since 2014.
Mm. And it's
So he
like
makes a,
2018. Yeah.
yeah. So he makes a call and he says, fix this now. And I walk out of that building and magically my clearance pops up in the system.
Hey, I'm sure there were no consequences to this whatsoever.
That's right. Podcast over. Our boy Dylan Borland lived happily ever after with his clearances restored.
Yep.
Borland says, that morning I got a phone call from BAE Security and they are not happy with what I did.
No shit. I'm not surprised, but it seems like the right thing to do all the
Yeah,
same.
for sure. Borland says, I took the first job I could, and long story short, I come into work a couple weeks later and I say, here's my 2 weeks notice, I'm out of here. And they're like, oh, what can we do to keep you? And I was like, there's absolutely nothing you can do to keep me.
Yeah, no shit. I mean,
Had that
if someone
experience.
already has a job offer, like it's already done, but
Yeah.
especially in this case.
It's funny to know that even in a world of like secret programs and UFO shit and reprisals and administrative
Yeah.
terrorism, they still have exit interviews and
Yeah,
bosses
and
who
2 week
have to
notices.
pretend that like, oh, well how about a
How
5%
could
raise? Would that convince you?
like
You still
yeah.
got to do the song and dance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Borland says, I walk out of that office and the company that hired me contacts me and says, see if you can guess it.
Clearance has been revoked or
Your
missing
clearance
or
has been erased again.
amazing.
So I lost my clearance in May of 2018. The company that hired me for about a month, they're working on getting my clearance fixed. And in early to mid June, I was contacted by the company that hired me and they said, we are unable to get your clearance back in the system. We have to move on to other candidates. Good luck out there. We don't think you're ever going to get your clearance fixed.
Yeah, after I asked that, I realized that like if there's someone in the system that grants clearances that doesn't want you to have a clearance, like you're not going to get one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So this next section, I'm going to talk about various reprisals that Borland suffered. I want to remind you, like I said before, almost all of these are, some aspect of them is deniable or
Mm.
explainable, but it paints a pattern. I will also point out that he tells these stories kind of scattershot throughout the episode. And while I've done my best to reconstruct the timeline of his employment and where everything happened, I am unclear on where and when all of these bits of reprisal happens.
Okay.
My read on it is all of this happened after the triangle and he started working for BAE.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, they took his clearance away and decided they were going to start punishing him. I believe all of this stuff happened while he's at BAE and continued to happen after he left. But I'm going to start with one story that does have a clear timeline, which is immediately after he left BAE, right?
Okay.
His job gets pulled. He no longer has a clearance. He's struggling with the reality of that. Borland says, that night I was invited out and I was getting ready to sell my vehicles. I had pulled my 401k at this point because I knew I was done. I had filed for unemployment, which they denied me for. And on the way home, I totaled my car. And there was a police investigation. And the police told me in confidence that my brake lines were cut. They wanted it to look like a suicide.
Oh, wow. That totally sucks. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's so scary.
Now, Knapp and Corbell ask some pretty reasonable questions, and it's clear that there's parts of the story that they're kind of glossing over. So they said that night Borland offered himself up for a breathalyzer, and that didn't happen.
Mm.
The lead investigator came to talk to him the next day, and from the police's perspective, dude went out with his buddy for a few drinks, totaled his car on the way home. They're assuming there's been a crime committed. He was driving under the influence and wrecked his car. Sure. The lead investigator, Borland says, told him verbatim, the only reason I'm not charging you with a crime is because your brake lines were cut. Unfortunately, there's no record of that conversation, and there's no record in it of the police report. So there is a police report that his car was totaled and the police talked to him. It doesn't mention the brake lines getting cut. Now, if you're in kind of conspiracy mindset, which Borland clearly is, and I don't think is unreasonable, there's probably some pressure being exerted to not mention that fact. But definitely, I understand if you're a skeptic, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Next statement, Borland says, I had to pull my 401k because I didn't have a clearance. I couldn't get a job. I almost lost my house. I had to fight BAE and the agencies I work for unemployment. Basically, I lost everything but my house. The VA is denying I ever did these jobs and denying that I had issues from those jobs.
Yeah, that's... So this had to be like 6 months or something after he left or something. Maybe 3.
Yeah. Now, these other ones are a little unclear. Well, actually, I take it back. This next one, I know exactly when it happened because he gave a date. But anyway, fast forwarding to 2024 after he loses his current job, he says, I go in for a CI polygraph for a certain agency. I was unfamiliar with the term CI polygraph, but apparently there is a type of clearance you can hold that is TS SCI, so top secret, secure compartmented information, poly, which means you regularly have an administered polygraph where they ask you things to make sure that you haven't been compromised by Russian agents, that you don't have weird gambling debts, that you don't have things that could be used to blackmail you. So this is a routine procedure, but it is still, you're hooked up to a polygraph, right?
Yeah, it's still probably stressful.
Yeah. He says, I go in for a CI polygraph for a certain agency, and I'm asked, what don't you want to talk about? And I make it clear, I don't want to talk about my IG report. Now, we're going to talk about that later. He goes to see the Intelligence Community Inspector General. He has a complaint, active investigation, but these are supposed to be confidential. That's the whole point of an IG, right? So he says, I don't want to talk about my IG complaint. And the guy goes, what was the nature of your complaint? What are the details? And I'm like, you can't ask me that. You don't have a need to know.
Yeah. I mean,
now he kind of jokes about this at the time. He's like, is that a form of reprisal? Like, was this guy just curious and didn't really read the room? Or was this them probing for information? Like, technically, they asked me a question that I didn't answer. Like, did I fail that polygraph? Is that part of why I don't have clearances? Like the boundaries of what qualifies as administrative terrorism and what's just kind of normal fuck up land are hazy at best.
Yeah. Yeah. And IG complaints, like that, I don't know, that's got to be dicey. I can see why a counter intel person would ask it, but I can also see why he wouldn't answer it.
You are not allowed to ask that. 100%. Yeah. Another story, the rest of these are the ones that are unclear timeline. He says, I witnessed a suicide with other veterans. The police contacted the VA on my behalf to tell the psychologist there that this happened. I went in with another veteran. We went into our psychological eval from the suicide that we both witnessed together. He was treated with due respect, asked how he felt, apologized, the whole nine. What they did to me, they accused me of faking a police report, faking being a police officer, wrote in my official medical records that I'm a liar and I'm prone to delusions.
Why? I feel like there's got to be so much more there. Or maybe it is just reprisals.
Or it's exactly as he thinks it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't fault any skeptic who looks at any one of these stories and goes, well, they don't usually put in your report that you're delusional unless there's a reason for it. But it also works pretty nicely as a way to keep someone you don't want talking under control and have a way to discredit them. This next part is buck wild. He says, I was put into a hypnosis biofeedback program where once a week I had to go to the VA and I would be hooked up to a polygraph machine and they would flash images of an Afghan child with a gun switching to a butterfly, and I'm hooked up to this polygraph machine and I have to count backwards from 100 by 7 while they're flashing images. And if I get the number wrong, they start screaming at me, honking an air horn, and I have to restart.
Wow. So,
right?
One interesting aside, the counting back from 100 by 7 is actually a very common psych eval trick.
I fail that test every single time.
I mean, most people,
circumstances.
So most people struggle with it, just to be clear.
Sure.
But most people are still you're counting down and you're still using numbers. Someone who fails that test starts talking about letters or stories or images. That's what it's.
So they're looking
if you get the numbers wrong, but you're still talking about numbers by the end, that's usually a pass.
Yeah, I cannot imagine what the point of this hypnosis biofeedback program where they flash upsetting imagery, make you count back, so they're putting you under pressure, they're screaming at you if you get it wrong. What is the expected outcome? Knapp and Corbell both mentioned that this sounds like some Clockwork Orange MK Ultra bullshit. This is super weird. This next part is even more wild. Borland said, there was a doctor who filed a complaint within the IG at the VA on my behalf because they were, in his opinion, trying to get me to kill myself. The VA put me on a prescription medication for PTSD and depression. Now, no, they still denied I had PTSD or depression, but they put me on the medication for it. I woke up in the middle of the night while on this medication, and the physical response in my brain was to commit suicide. And he describes this the same way that you wake up and your body is you have to go to the bathroom. It was a physical instinct. It wasn't a thought. It was a bodily need.
Yeah, I've heard that from some of the antidepressants in the 2000s had that kind of feeling. It's crazy.
So Borland says, I freaked out, rightly so. Something I will never do is commit suicide. I'm a Roman Catholic. It's against my religion to do so. And the VA psychologist, who was a CIA employee of all things, said, oh, this is common. You need to increase your dose.
No, that's such a bad idea. You need a different med.
Yeah. Borland says, my psychiatrist found out there was a team dedicated to me at the VA, and he filed a complaint against that team. He was told nothing's going to change, and I answer to them. He told me verbatim, he said, Dylan, you need to do everything in your power to live through this. What they're doing to you is wrong. Do not trust any of these doctors. There is something very wrong with what is being done to you.
That's terrifying from your psychiatrist.
Yeah. So like I said, any individual one of these stories, sure. But clearances seemingly being repressed, your brake
Mm.
lines are cut, your house is broken into, they're denying your unemployment, they're denying that you have any of the medical conditions that you have so they won't treat them, they're
Mhm.
denying that you ever worked any jobs, they scream at you during weird medical tests that you're required to take, they put you on drugs that make you want to kill yourself. Like, I don't fault anyone who's dismissing any part of this, but cumulatively, I see a pretty clear pattern of they're trying to get this guy to shut the fuck up and go away. Best case scenario, more likely scenario, by killing himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm struggling because there's a guy I used to work with who every couple of years sends an email to me and a whole litany of other people complaining about how an old job that I'm no longer at has been targeting him, and it sounds a lot like this.
Right.
But I can tell, like I worked with him. He's super
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
100%.
and this guy doesn't seem that crazy, just from what
Yeah.
we've read. I don't know.
And it's hard to evaluate these things from the
Yeah,
outside. It
yeah.
is absolutely possible that Borland is genuinely delusional. But what I would ask you to do is keep in mind what Knapp and Corbell are saying.
Yeah.
Borland is illustrative of a common story we hear from these whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And you don't have to believe every single detail in what he's saying to see a pattern across both the
Yeah.
things that happened to Borland and the things that we're seeing happen to other people.
Yeah. That
And
makes sense.
like the old joke goes, you're not paranoid if they really are trying to get you. Like,
Right.
how do you distinguish between that from the outside? If you don't have
Yeah.
evidence, it's impossible to tell the difference.
Yeah, for
Which
sure.
is arguably the point.
Yeah.
You know,
Probably.
like, if people are trying to suppress him, they want us having exactly this conversation right now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so moving on. He does finally quit, right? He gets his
Okay, good.
clearances
Good for
restored.
him.
He quits. He gets a new job. His clearances are yanked again. He's now unemployed. Shit's bad.
Yeah.
Um, Borland says, in late 2018, I get a phone call from somebody out of CENTCOM, and he says, I heard what happened to you. What they did to you was wrong. I'm going to send you paperwork to get your clearance fixed immediately. And Knapp immediately sounds suspicious. He's like, that sounds like come back in and shut the hell up. And Borland kind of shrugs.
Yeah, like I can't tell if this is a I don't know what CENTCOM is, but
Central Command. It's just a division of the
oh,
DoD.
oh, okay. Okay. Interesting. So Borland is talking a lot, and Knapp thinks this is just them trying to bring him back into the fold so they can control his
Maybe.
speech.
It's hard to
Okay.
say, right? And
Yeah.
Borland kind of shrugs. He's like, look, at this point, I'm just trying to keep a roof over my head. He
Yeah.
sends me a contract to deploy to Afghanistan to do security for $40K a year. He says,
Okay.
don't worry about the pay. Don't worry about the job. Just sign the contract. So Borland does. He says, then 3 months later, he calls me up and he's like, hey, your clearance is good to go. Everything's fine. Sorry you can't deploy to Afghanistan. Good luck, buddy.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So Corbell goes, oh, so he was just doing that to get your clearance reinstated. And Borland says, 100%.
That's fascinating. So that sounds like Central Command actually, like someone there actually did hear what happened and was trying to fix it.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. One is, yes, someone who doesn't approve of the way this is being handled tries to fix this one thing for Dylan. Another way to look at it is once he has his clearance, the jobs he can go for are things that they can monitor him and keep an eye at. So if they decide
Sure.
he's not going to kill himself, maybe it's better to put him in a program where we can keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
regardless, 6 months later, his clearances get restored again. Borland says, so from there, I got hired back to the company that tried to hire me, which is JIDO. That stands for Joint Improvised Threat Defeat Organization.
Hmm.
He says, this is 2019, and I am keeping my head down, trying to get my finances in order, just keeping my head down.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good plan. Like, recover your base, and then you can talk about UFOs again.
Yeah. He says, but I'm still paying attention. I'm paying attention to the chat coming through work. I'm paying attention to reporting. This is 2019, early 2019.
Yeah,
So
right.
remember that it's only been a year since Lou Elizondo came out of the woodwork and the world found out about ATIP. So he said, ATIP, OSAP. He said, I'm looking at everybody sideways. Like, I don't trust anybody. 2022 rolls around and the UAP task force becomes known to me, and I'm kind of participating in the forum.
Wait, what forum? What does that mean?
Okay, this is a downside of an audio medium.
Yeah.
They don't publish official transcripts of their podcast. So they said R space. Is that OUR space? Is that r/space, like a Reddit forum? Like,
Right.
I searched for this. I couldn't find any reference to it. They also mentioned something called Chat Surfer, which I was able to find some references to, and is basically a DoD chat room. My read on this is he's participating in internal DoD forums, kind of like what we heard from Matthew Brown, where he talked about being on forums and internal file systems, trying to find access to information that he theoretically has access to.
Okay, interesting.
Borland says, I'm pulling data from the forum that I know is 100% true, people from the legacy program, and I'm putting in little pieces myself in there to put people on the right track. And Corbell says, were you posting under your own name? And Borland says, yes.
Oh, man, not again.
I feel so bad for him at this point. Like, I get it, and maybe you don't have an option. Like, you either post under your name or you don't post. But I feel like, I thought you were keeping your head down, buddy. It's only been 2 years. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's telling this story because by virtue of participating in these groups in this forum, he says in fall of 2022, somebody, and he won't name them, so we have to infer who it is, and there's not enough to infer. He says, somebody who was interviewed by the task force and claimed to be a whistleblower makes a declaration that the people who worked in the legacy program, their lives were in danger. Now, I am cutting a big, long swath here where there's a whole lot of forum drama.
Like, of course, because it's
this
forum.
guy is posting things that Dylan thinks are lies. Dylan is outing him for that. They're feuding a little bit. He says when this guy says the people in the legacy program's lives are in danger, he says, I called this guy up and berated him for over an hour. But I have no context for why or who or what their relationship is. None of that matters. What happens is, at the end of it, he comes to the conclusion that regardless of what reservations he has about this guy, he has to take him at his word. And he hears confirmation of this threat from a couple of other places. So he says, the problem is I can't let anyone die. That was my promise to the people I knew in the legacy program, that if they died, I would come forward as a whistleblower. And I don't want them to die. Right. So I decide to come forward and go to Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I don't know. I don't know what I would do, but that makes sense for his character. And
it's hard to know when you become a whistleblower. I do think it's interesting that the friends that he has said, if I die, go public. And he says, I went public because I didn't want them to die.
Right, yeah.
I hear you. But that wasn't the terms of the deal, buddy.
Yeah, yeah. Because they could be damaged by this.
Well, and this becomes a sticking point later as he's having to testify to people. He's having to protect his sources. So anyway, he says, in March 2023, I get connected with the Senate, and in a skiff, I gave them my direct knowledge of the triangle, my direct knowledge of that entire event, a legacy program in detail with technology integration, how it works, where it's at, the whole kit and caboodle. And 3 weeks later, I get a phone call, and they say, we want you to go to Arrow as soon as possible.
So I feel sad even asking this. Did he give any indication that there were actually senators in that skiff?
I'm
'Cause we've seen that
glossing
in the
over this a
past.
bit. They do a lot of name dropping without name dropping. They say frustrating things like, there was an attorney in the room who and Corbell's like, I
Mm.
know who you're talking about. And they're like,
Okay.
there was a member in the briefing in the Senate who was very involved in this stuff and isn't involved anymore. And I could sit here
Mm.
and speculate with you, like, who's in the Senate who was involved in 2023 and isn't anymore. Maybe
Yeah.
Marco Rubio, who is now a member of the administration. But, like, it's
But
all
we don't know.
speculation. They're just dancing
Yeah.
around it. The point
Okay.
is, he's careful to say he's not allowed to use the word testify, but he speaks to, in a secure setting, both the
Mm-hmm.
Senate and the House. He
Okay.
gives them information that they
Yeah.
take seriously, and they refer him to Arrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Borland says, so I went to Arrow. I went through that whole process with them, and I think they were quite shocked with the information I gave them and how I could tie it to legacy programs and certain technologies and capabilities. And I told them I would not disclose certain information they wanted because I believed those individuals would be targeted. And then that became a whole issue later when I got my classified Arrow MFR, which is Memorandum for the Record.
What is an MFR though?
So what's supposed to happen when you testify to Arrow is they put together a memo saying, here's what you told us, and that's supposed to be unclassified. In Borland's case, they classified it, which, is that common? Is that happening all the time?
Okay.
But he explains it with an analogy. He says, so basically, hypothetically speaking, let's say that I claim I saw a Bigfoot running around the Nevada test range. And I saw Bigfoot outside the Starbucks. And Bigfoot was wearing a U.S. Air Force uniform. And I draw a nice picture of Bigfoot in a pretty Air Force uniform. And if I said that to Arrow, and Arrow comes back and says, hey, Dylan, you talking about Starbucks is unclassified. You talking about Bigfoot in a military uniform, that's top secret, no foreign. You are never to say another word about that. That's what Arrow did to me. They classified everything I brought forward.
I mean, it's hardly surprising. That was Kirkpatrick, right?
I believe so, but this is the thing
Yeah, it
that we
doesn't
keep
even
hearing.
matter.
Like, the
Yeah.
whistleblowers who went to Arrow either believe that they weren't taken seriously, or they talk about the act of testifying to Arrow being weaponized against them, of now the things you said are classified and you're not allowed to talk about it publicly. So you would have been better not going to Arrow.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that was March of 2023 that he goes to the Senate. A few weeks later, he goes to Arrow. In June of 2023 is when the congressional hearing with David Grush happened. So that's when David Grush breaks onto the scene.
Okay.
So Borland says, I get a phone call after David Grush testifies, and they say, hey, Dylan, we want you to go to the ICIG. And that's Intelligence Community Inspector General. And to be honest with you, out of everything, I really feel like the IG process was the worst. The questions they asked me, the things that were said to me, made me feel like that was a fishing expedition. And the only thing they cared about was finding out how much I actually knew. And at the end of this, it was, you're credible, not urgent. Go disappear into the wind. Leave this all behind. Shut up. Do not do anything.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the Inspector General is there for, but I would imagine that if it's anything like a large company lawyer, their job is not to protect you, it's to protect the company. And
it's so funny you say this. I can tell that Chuck hasn't read the notes because like 2 paragraphs from now, I have a quote from Dylan Borland saying, there's a joke among all the military guys, which is, the JAG isn't for you. The JAG is for the DOD. The IG isn't for us. The IG is for the government. And that's the way I feel.
100%. Yeah.
Yep. Everyone knows if you tell HR, their job is not to protect you. It's to protect the company. Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
So what's frustrating about this is Borland says, I was told everything I talked about in that room is now up for executive review, meaning classified. You can't talk about it. I talked about my childhood. I talked about
Mm.
unclassified information that's readily available on the internet. And they said, Dylan, every single thing you talked about is now subject to executive review. Do not go outside those bounds.
Yeah, I actually think that's I don't know. I think that's normal even in corporate situations, which sucks.
It does suck. And
Yeah.
the thing that we're seeing here is we have heard rumors about Arrow and ICIG procedures being used to silence whistleblowers before, but this is the first-hand account we've had of
Mm.
it. So
Yeah.
this isn't new information to us, but it's nice to hear from a first-hand witness about what that's like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now, he talked about because they were trying to classify things that are by definition unclassified, he basically didn't accept that. And he was like,
Yeah.
this re- makes no sense.
Yeah.
I need to know, how do I go to DOPSR? He starts talking to a lawyer. He starts talking to
Yeah.
George
That's
Knapp
the
and
answer.
Jeremy Corbell. So, you know, but definitely he's in ambiguous legal territory here.
Yeah.
And
You
I
got to get a
think
lawyer.
this kind of adds up to everything he's talked about, which is almost everything they have done to him has been done in a way that, viewed through the right lens, might not look like administrative terrorism so much as just normal administrative bullshit.
Mm.
And it's hard to tell the difference between weaponizing the bullshit that an administration has and just suffering from it like normal, like anyone would. So
Yeah. Right.
it's a frustrating story. I wanted to talk about it because I especially thought that the bit about archaeological digs was new information that was
Yeah.
worth bringing
Yeah.
up.
That's super interesting.
And it's also really interesting because we have heard vague stories, sometimes not vague, but we've heard about Lou Elizondo having reprisals with them denying he ever worked for the government. And then once they had to admit he worked for the government, like, okay, he worked for the government, but he never ran Arrow. Okay, he ran Arrow, but Arrow wasn't what he said it was. And okay, he ran Arrow, but it had no fund. Like just constantly trying to undermine him publicly.
Mm-hmm.
We saw David Grush, similar kinds of things. And when they couldn't undermine his record because it was too well established, they leaked his medical records to the
Right.
press so that they could make him look like he was suffering a mental breakdown. So we're definitely seeing across the board this type of pushback. And while it is disheartening to talk about Borland because his story does not have a happy ending, he lost his job, his final job, in 2014, and he can no longer work in the intelligence community. He knows for a fact he has been blackballed. He's never going to get a clearance again. He has to start over. And when George Knapp asked him, he's like, what are you going to do now? He's like, cash in my 401k again and, start over again. We'll see what happens. But he's at the point where he didn't want to be a whistleblower. He became a whistleblower because he believed lives were in danger. And he's frankly carrying around quite a bit of anger at how he's been treated, rightly so.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense to me. But yeah, why would he want to go back into the IC? Like, yeah.
So I wish him
Sounds
well.
shitty.
It's a frustrating story. I did save one quote to end with here.
Okay.
There is kind of a through line that we have started seeing with these guys, which is they will come out and they share the nuts and bolts aspects of what they're dealing with first. And then they will slip in a hint of something bigger, right? So David Grush was very nuts and bolts. There is a crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. It exists, and I have 40 witnesses. Also, maybe they're not aliens. Maybe they're interdimensional. Whoa, what? Matthew Brown comes out and he's like, I found evidence of this like intelligence platform that's being used to track UFOs. And also God is real. He's like, what?
Oh.
So now we're dealing with Dylan Borland, who has a very factual thing. Hey, I saw a UFO. It did the following. I was exposed to the following information in the following circumstances, and this is why I became a whistleblower. Also, one of the things I was exposed to is that there have been Tic-Tacs excavated at archaeological sites, which has a whole lot of weird implications if you think
Yeah.
about it for more than a second. And at one point, George Knapp kind of asked him, he's like, look, man, what does this all mean? Like, and Borland says, I'll give my opinion. He said, this is my opinion, knowing what I know for a fact, looking at history and looking at it through my perspective. I think what we're dealing with is very, very, very old. I think old humans have written down what happened in religious stories. I think it's quite clear that we have been influenced by something else. These things, whatever they are probably what are referred to as gods or demons or angels. Humanity has the same stories across many cultures. A flood, crafts that are in the sky, things that are coming in to help humans. My big picture idea is that it's been here for a very long time. It goes by many names and it's many different things, and it has an influence on all of us.
It's, I mean, I think that's a common thought. It's not a hard one to believe.
Yeah. So anyway, man, that's Dylan Borland.
That's
what a story, huh?
That's a whirlwind. That's so interesting.
Yeah, whirlwind is right.
Yeah.
So we're like an hour and a half in. I don't really have time to get all the way into it, but I do want to mention one little bit of supporting story. So if you enjoy George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, they put out like 3 hours of interview with Dylan Borland. And then the next episode they put out was The Witness That Congress Wanted You to Hear. And that's a little bit of hyperbole, but basically we know that when Congress is setting these things up, they vet many different witnesses. And at the end, they pick and choose the ones that they think will make the most impact in a short period of time. One of these guys who went all the way through the vetting process and was one of the ones they were strongly considering ended up not getting chosen. So Jeremy Corbell did a quick interview with him. He has a very simple story that nicely echoes Dylan Borland's story about the triangle. I encourage anybody to go listen to it. It's interesting, but the short version of it is this guy was in ranger training and he hurt his back. He is in a hospital bed in a medical unit in Eglin Air Force Base. He's wearing one of those big, like, full torso braces. He says it's the middle of the night and he hears this weird noise, like a very loud engine or generator, like spinning up and spinning down. And it goes on long enough that he's like, what the hell is going on? He gets up and he goes to talk to the kid sitting at the desk, the duty person. Hey, what's going on? But the kid has headphones on and hasn't heard anything. He's like, I don't know. They're probably testing the Aurora project or something. So he's like, all right, whatever. So he steps out on the porch to smoke a cigarette. And he looks over and he sees that there's a big, like, field, like a clearing. And in the field are a bunch of those tall, like, work lights like you have on construction sites. Lots of personnel, Humvees, trucks, some black SUVs, which implies civilians. And he said it took him a moment to notice that hovering above them is a massive triangle the size of a football field.
Interesting.
Now, unlike Dylan Borland, it did not fly to him, but he did watch it rise up and take off, and it moved in ways that normal craft doesn't. He talked about something interesting, which is he says every craft we have that hovers oscillates. Like helicopters do it, VTOLs do it. There's always a little bit of that. This thing is dead solid. There's no noise. Like, the noise that he was hearing was generators, not the craft.
Sure, for the lights, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, anyway, weird story. The thing that I think is interesting about it, and Jeremy Corbell makes this point, is most of the people we've heard who talk about seeing these craft over military bases, we speculate about who's flying them and why they're there. In this case, the presence of Humvees and trucks and lights and everything below it pretty strongly implies that this is our craft that they are testing, as opposed to a visitor that's surveilling something they're doing.
Or at least that
Not
there's
definitive,
like
of course, but
communication and there's some planning, because you have to get all those assets into one place. That takes time. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's not like the most exciting story, but I think it kind of nicely echoes Dylan Borland's testimony. And we're increasingly hearing these stories about either large triangles or football field sized craft. And, you know, like, I don't care what you think is happening with state-of-the-art drone technology. We don't have a lot of things that could lift something the size of a football field and move at any reasonable speed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I see there's a reference down here titled Grush Vetted Borland.
Oh,
We didn't really
yeah.
talk
Sorry.
about that.
So in that same podcast, they open and they mention that David Grush looked at Dylan Borland, interviewed him, and was one of the ones who referred him to Congress. Notably, Borland was not one of David Grush's 40 witnesses. They clarified that. But David Grush did vet him and believes Dylan Borland. So I wanted to mention that because I know that, you know, David Grush is our good boy. And that gives a little bit more credibility to Borland, I think.
For sure. Yeah. And I feel like Grush would be able to suss out if he's just paranoid schizophrenic or something. That does mean a lot.
Right. So anyway, it's a very exciting time.
It is a very exciting time. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our Discord and social media accounts.
And you can feel free to email us at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon, patreon.com/veryexcitingtime, or get some merch at veryexcitingtime.com/merch.
That's right. And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.
Anytime.